like we're not driving around without seatbelts on. Now we know an accident can still happen, but we wear seatbelts because, if we do have an accident, we want to protect ourselves as much as possible. That's what we're doing as we're, working here in the communities. So yeah, so that's a bit of how the state is of COVID here. Also, the only last thing I want to say, and then I'll listen to whatever more questions you have. We've pretty closely tracked with parts of California as it relates to when we've been having a surge and when the wave or a surge has been dying down. I think parts of Los Angeles have probably been much more high than we have here, but so a surge happened. So Thanksgiving doesn't happen down here, but a big surge did happen after Christmas. That has now died down. So Mexico uses colors of lights: red, orange, yellow, green. So we were at red for quite a while, which is pretty much most things are closed down except for essential activities, only takeout, no dining in, things like that. We've dropped to orange and now down to yellow. Speaking with local healthcare officials, they're anticipating that there will likely be another surge around Easter, especially because Semana Santa, Easter, the 2-week period around Easter is a very, very important and big deal here, where that brings families, together and various celebrations. So they're anticipating there's going to be another surge after that, but that will then be dying down before we get into June. And then the very last thing I want to say, also kind of still about COVID, there is not yet a comprehensive vaccine strategy that has already been implemented in Mexico. And so to say, there's very few people who have in Mexico who have had a vaccine, and there's not necessarily a real optimism that that'll start happening before the summer. So, it's also maybe relevant to at least share an update on that as well.
Scott, have you had, I don't think you've had any American groups come up to this point. You have?
We have. Yes.
How many of you had so far?
So it hasn't been many, and really, right. Yeah. So really, to say we have only had 2 times in the fall that we hosted 2 teams, yes, from the U.S. And now we do have a couple of teams that are scheduled for the spring, but we're still a bit doubtful that those will actually come. Now, there's numerous teams we have on the calendar in the summer. And in fact, the week that you're on the calendar, there are 3 other teams, not sizable ones, but 3 other teams. There's a team from Georgia, a team from Agora Hills, and a team from Birmingham, Alabama. Now, those all happen to be teams that that represents 3 of our board members. 3 of our 5 board members, those are their churches, and they're all super eager to get down here. But we recognize, that a lot may happen between now and June. But at this point, we have 6 weeks of teams wanting to come during the summertime. And so we're preparing and planning for that, but I honestly don't know. I'll say from a budgeting standpoint and just, my fiduciary responsibility to our board. I planned that this year we would likely or potentially only have virtual missions work happening. So I've kind of planned for the worst, but hoping and preparing for much better than that.
So Scott, if we had 2 teams of 12 that want to come, you guys would be good with that. Is that?
Oh yeah, and that's what we have you on the calendar right now for that. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was my first question. Is people on the other side have to want us to come. I mean, people want us to come, but
yeah,
whether or not they will allow it, I guess, is another way of putting it.
Yeah.
What is my friend at the orphanage, he goes every weekend, but it's just him and his wife. Is there anything at the border happening where when I drive with my big van, my 12-passenger van, but I only got 6 people in it because I'm trying to spread out in the vans. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that at the border that's flagging, or are they flagging vans and saying, no, you can't come in because of COVID? No. Are they hassling people? Is it anything that you're seeing?
Yeah, and to say, though we have only hosted a couple of teams, I will say, as I continue to be in communication, myself and a number of leaders of other ministries all meet together regularly, and and as each ministry has some different components to it. There are some ministries that I'm great friends with here who have continued working without stop, if you will. And then others like ourselves have, really had a pause. But to say there, other than a period of time last summer when Ensenada was in its first wave, and Ensenada had not yet started its first wave, but Mexicali and Tijuana were both really experiencing a wave. And so Ensenada took the step of they essentially kind of closed all the 4 inbound highways or access roads into Ensenada, and they were checking people. You could only get into Ensenada if you were able to show, a proof of residency in Ensenada. They were doing that here locally, trying to stem that kind of from Mexicali and Tijuana. So they tried that for about a month or so. And then, then they stopped doing that and they haven't done that again. With the exception of that, Dan, there's never been a time throughout COVID where coming into Mexico has been any issue at all for either Americans, Canadians, Mexicans. There has not been any anything at all, nor has there been any change for Americans returning back to Mexico. And even to say, I mean, sometimes I will try to not vet here, okay? But my wife is not able to travel to travel to the US with me. She could fly, but she can't drive with me, even though, she has a 10-year tourist visa. But I can go. And when I cross, they don't even ever ask me any questions like, where have you been? They never checked me for anything. And so to say, so it bothers me a bit that there's the double standard. But for those of us who are Americans going back into the United States, they don't care where you're, there's no issue with that. So there's no issue traveling in, and there's no issue traveling back. So so that just, it hasn't been an issue at all any of this time.
So Veronica, you're kind of quiet, but you're always quiet. I'm used to that. You're a little hesitant, I think, about going to Mexico. What hesitancy do you have?
I'm really not hesitant. I think it was more of knowing that you guys were in flags and like your red flag. And I think that was probably the, as we're looking at it on our end too, because traveling, I mean, this past year I've done, quite a bit of traveling from airports and, different destinations. But I think it was more of just the flag that you guys are in and how much of that would impact a group to go. I think that was probably the biggest thing, but for myself, it's, I'm good to travel. It's not that it isn't. It's just, I think, looking at other, just like the flags and see where you guys are at.
Yeah.
Makes it for others, either taking their children or themselves that are a little more concerned. But as you were saying, you guys were in the red flag. I think you guys were in the red flag 2 weeks ago and
That's
that we've
right.
seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that's it. I mean, that was just the, as we keep an eye on that. And I mean, we do week to week. I know, Veronica Turner also, we're always just looking at it just to see where we're at, what that looks like, because the trips also to Agua Viva, those are the things that we kind of just are paying attention to, but not just, I mean, for ourselves, but I think just for everybody, just to keep, whoever asks, how do you feel about it? Or, how does that, does it make you feel comfortable? And, for me, it's okay, but for others, it might, where do you put that comfort in them? And it's really up to them,
Yeah.
So
and that's one of the reasons, if I may, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to point out that there certainly is an expectation that in some ways, maybe it's helpful that Easter is a little earlier this year, being the 4th of April, but there is the expectation that by the mid-April, there will be another surge happening. And so, before that, maybe we'll even get down to green, although I doubt it. We'll probably still be at yellow, but it wouldn't be a surprise to us if then it goes like orange and then red again. But there would be the optimistic hope that would subside again before June. And so I think, we all will want to continue to be watching that. But just to say that wouldn't be a surprise at all for that to happen like mid-April to, into May. So, yeah, so that,
yes,
that
Scott, we're going through the same exercise for Power Week, which is the last week in April. So
okay.
to Aqua Viva. So that would be our first trip from GU since last year. And so we're going through a lot of things. Now, one of the things we figured out on that trip is the accommodations at the orphanage. What's the orphanage name, Beth? Do you remember?
La Hermosa.
La Hermosa. He has a facility for 70 people, and the most we'll have is 20. And so I felt really good, and it's brand new, so I felt really good because we could spread out. At Aqua Viva, our seminaries count is like 20% of the normal amount. What are you guys on the accommodation side? Are you spreading it out a little bit? Are you going half? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we have capped our capacity at half of what would be normal. So we've been practicing this, if you will, week in and week out, even though we haven't had teams necessarily. As I mentioned, we worked 26 straight weeks with our staff. And so as we continued to have like dining and then even like staff meetings, we've been doing everything, with socially distant. And so even in our chapel, for instance, anytime we're having a group meeting, we're doing it at smaller numbers, chairs spread out, asking people to have their masks on. We have dining, especially in June, there's dining inside and outside, we're able to spread people out but also then to say, as far as the accommodations, as far as the rooms. Now, Some of that will depend on, so if it's families, then, some of it I think will be in conversation, with, I'm not sure if it's Beth or Veronica, I'm not sure who ends up being kind of the point person and in some of the pre-arrival communication, but it would be helpful for us to know what would be some of the room requests, if you will, especially when there's families, there end up being some more types of requests, from that. And we do have many rooms that we're able to utilize just for putting families in, because often when it's a family trip, they want to be kept as family units, so we have a decent amount, we have a decent mix of accommodations here, as far as we do have some larger dorms, more kind of the 20 plus bedrooms, that when if we have a team, and again, some of this, as we've been communicating with teams, some teams are coming where they have, like I'll just say without throwing them under the bus, our team from Birmingham, Alabama, in Alabama, their churches never stopped meeting, and they're, so for them, they're like, hey, you can pack us all in a room. We don't care. So we somewhat also, with regard to the rooms, we are trying to communicate with each potential team, and we want to know what their wishes are and their expectations so that we can meet that. But we've purposefully lowered our capacity way down so that we're still giving ourselves a lot of flexibility.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, let me ask you, hang on just a sec. Chris,
Okay.
you have a kid that, you have one of my grandkids I'm letting you watch all the time. Would you allow Tyler to go on the trip, knowing what you know right now?
You talking to me?
Oh, no, he talked to me. I mean, I don't think I can answer that without talking to Dave.
Right.
But I mean, I have traveled myself and feel that it would be fine to go.
I mean,
Yeah.
if Dave was
If
fine
it
with
was, if it was up to me and only me, the answer would be yeah.
Okay. And Daniel Isley, and then it'll be your turn next, Beth, so just hang on. Dan, any questions or any comments?
So, I mean, Scott, you're saying that it's basically like going to the grocery store. And so essentially you're talking about is wearing a mask all day long in the heat in June, working around everybody. And when you come back to base camp, any hanging around, is with a mask unless you're with your immediate family or group.
Essentially, Dan, that's correct. Now I will say, the heat of the summer here, remembering that we're right next to the ocean. And so, it gets a lot hotter at Agua Viva than it does, here. And so generally so I went out every single week, in July and in August, which are much hotter than June. And so I was wearing a mask, all day long. Essentially what we do, so I want to talk about maybe 4 different times of the day. There's the time traveling. So there would be, the time traveling from here out to the job site, if you will. That's up to each vehicle that's going, so I mean, we have our suggestions, but we really, we want to show deference to, to teams in certain ways. And so, when you're traveling in the vehicle, I mean, that's up to you guys, if you will, what your standard would be. whether or not you have masks on, or not. At our work sites, and part of how we divide up the people, if you will, that are working, on each site, we ask everyone to be wearing their masks during the day. Most, I'll say, a lot of folks are using more of what I call like the gator type masks, but which very breathable, very comfortable for like being out on a job site.
Yeah.
But there's different time, but I do want to say we're trying to cultivate a healthy environment, but we're not out there like the Nazi police, if you will.
Yeah. What's the social norm down there about mask wearing?
So I can say this with 100% integrity. It is not at all political in Mexico. And so everyone wears masks here because there is no political conversation in Mexico about do masks or don't masks work. There in the US, there's been such a big political conversation about that. In Mexico, there hasn't at all. And so everyone wears masks, that's, so yeah, we haven't had any issue at all with having, we show up to build for a family and they all have their masks on, and they keep their masks on all day long, so there's the part of going to the job site. So then out at the job site, and we're not working too close together, but you're all the same group together. And so then you're really only working with one family. And then there's a, if you have certain people, let's say on the group, who maybe would be a bit more concerned, they can choose how close they want to be spending with the family. If someone maybe feels more comfortable, I'm willing to go and I just want to kind of hammer or paint, or they can do that, so we're also able to kind of manage out in the community. We are not doing like any type of community outreach where we're bringing together a whole bunch of kids. We're definitely communicating with the local pastors that when we're going out and working with a family, we're really wanting to go and just be focusing in on that family. And so, and because of the fact that the social norm in Mexico is everyone's kind of wearing masks, you don't have as many kids just kind of wandering around on the street, if you will, like there has been in years past. So from that standpoint, naturally, that's just kind of changed that environment. Then there's the environment when you're back here at campus and just hanging out on campus. And so one of the things to say is that, each time we have a group here, we always work to provide a kind of gathering spot that they can have, as a group together. And we leave that up to the group to decide what are their protocols they want to have in place. And then also in their rooms, so to speak. So yes, we are asking everyone while they're on campus, like out in mixing with public in the patio, going into chapel, that we're utilizing masks. But there are places where if people are wanting some relief from that and they're all feeling fine with that, hey, that's totally fine. So we're trying to find that healthy balance, if you will.
Perfect.
Thanks, Dan. Good question. Okay, Beth, now it's you.
Scott, are all the kids in masks, or how young are the kids having to wear masks?
And I assume that you're asking with regard to that are helping or serving. Is that the question?
Like in Mexico, it's different sometimes in America. What
Yeah,
the age is. So some places are 10 and under, and some are like
yeah,
under 2 and under.
yeah, yeah.
Pretty wide.
I will say that that does vary. I noticed that does vary depending on, you know, which community or which area of town. I will say that the families that we've been working with, they have, if the child has been over 3 years old, they've been kind of wearing a mask. But I do want to say that I say that as a father of a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old that, you know, have grown up here their whole lives. My in many ways, I think because of the I'll say the hard life that many children in the villages live, where they grow up so quickly because they end up, you know, caring for siblings and having to have so many responsibilities at a young age. I often find, you know, 5 and 6 year olds in the communities who seem to be more grown up than my 10-year-old and 13-year-old. So just to say, yeah, we notice fairly young kids when are often using masks, but real, you know, younger than 3 years old, I'd say I generally don't see them wearing masks. And we are not necessarily, you know, we're not as again, we're always wanting to be mindful of why we're out there. I'm talking a bit right now about us wanting to be culturally sensitive. We always are thinking about why are we out there, and you know, who are we out there for? And so, you know, my partner Nathan and myself, we spend a lot of time talking about relationship based versus rules based. And this has kind of challenged us to have to implement more protocols than we would normally have as a ministry. But when push comes to shove, like with regard to the families we're working with, you know, if we had a family that were not being particularly, and I don't want to get off track because your question was about kids, but I do want to say, if you know their 6, 7, 8, 9 year olds weren't wearing masks, we wouldn't necessarily get our, we wouldn't be bothered by that. But if we found ourselves in a situation where a group of people that we were having, you know, help us from the States, if that was an issue for them, one of the things that I think is great about YUGO Ministries, also wonderful about Agua Viva, is most of our staff are Mexican nationals, and you know, we look for the most gracious, tactful ways that we can relationally help work with the team and the families to try to keep peace and find common ground, rather than having things escalate that can become either divisive or a bad experience, you know, for anyone on either side. And so I haven't yet found myself in a situation where, with regard to the masks specifically, where that's been an issue. But I can only tell you that, you know, we recognize our role here as facilitators, and you know, we take that very seriously, and you know, we'll do everything we can to be communicating with people well, and to be, you know, loving people, and recognizing that, you know, we partner with people who often are hurting, and you know, we want them to be loved, you know, as a result of us being here.
I appreciate you guys have already thought about so many different scenarios. That helps us a lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott, if somebody happens to get sick down there, do you kind of have like an emergency escape plan, so to speak? One of my concerns is that Beth and I
Sure.
looking at trips all over the world.
Yep.
Mexico is probably our easiest trip.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to get people out. Lebanon, where I might go in October, might be a different case.
Yeah.
But anyway, have you thought that through a little bit?
Well, absolutely. And, you know, in my 19 years of being here, unfortunately, you know, we've had numerous different types of scenarios that have arisen. We haven't had a COVID related one per se, where we've needed to transfer someone, but you know, we've had a number of injuries and other types of illnesses that have happened with team members over the years. And you know, we have all of our staff who, especially those who serve as, you know, the leaders of projects out in the field, you know where all the medical facilities are and the phone. You know, it is helpful that it's also 911 here as it is in the US, and you know, the operators are bilingual here. But to say, I'll answer from a COVID standpoint, but this also, you know, there's probably on a construction site, there's more possibility that someone will get hurt versus contracting COVID. And so essentially, you know, what we do in every situation is we take someone to a good hospital here locally first. I mean, whether they need a stitch or if there's something more serious, you know, we take them to a local hospital first, and to then be able to assess whether or not, you know, it would be in the best interest of, you know, the patient to transport them, you know, to the US. And we've had times, you know, we had a young first trimester pregnant woman who fell off of a roof and broke her hip. You know, that was one of our more significant, you know, injuries. And, you know, and that was, but we've also had someone break a back, you know. This is over, you know, 20 years, thousands of people, you know, and they were both doing things they weren't, you know, the broken back was on a swing. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but I transported him. But the young woman, you know, she stepped off of a roof onto a ladder without someone holding it. You know, anyway. But we've had some significant injuries, and you know, and I come from my background having developed the water sports operation for the Walt Disney Company. You know, there was a lot of training that we went through in developing our emergency action procedures. And, you know, we've done a fair amount of that here as well as a staff. And so when someone gets hurt or gets sick or ill, we're used to dealing with that. We always offer to help take people to the hospital, be with them there. You know, we take people to hospitals that are generally dealing with Americans, you know, or wealthier Mexican nationals. That's where my daughters were born here, you know, and I've been in their operating suites, you know, and so they're places that most Americans would be very comfortable in. But if we ever need to transfer someone to or transport them to the US, there is Life Flight available, you know, to come down here, but also we're able to have people transferred in an ambulance up to actually what they do is the ambulance goes to the border and the ambulance comes and they you know, transfer from one ambulance to the other. Or we've, you know, taken people up in cars, but all of those things are, you know, have happened before, unfortunately. And so we're used to dealing with that.
Is there a question another group's given you that we haven't thought of? That's a good question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, what is another group asked you that we
Oh.
haven't asked?
Hmm.
That's a good question. Our questions obviously are good.
Yeah.
Well,
You know, one thing just to say as well, though I do realize there's debate about whether, how much of a difference this makes. I'm going to talk about checking temperature because, my wife had COVID. She never had a temperature. Neither did her brother or her sister-in-law. But our protocols that we have in place, because this is what is used here. When you walk into a grocery store, you put out your wrist and they check your temperature. Everyone, that's part of what they do here. But to say with our staff, every single day when our staff come in to work, they come masked up, we check their temperature. When we have already, as I mentioned, we haven't had a lot of groups, we've had 2 groups, we essentially, when they're coming into either chapel in the morning or into the dining hall, for the first time of the day, we check their temperature. We're providing the hand sanitizer. So just to say, we're doing a lot of things kind of every day where we're in the practice of doing it. We have, because I would think, maybe some questions would be like, when you're coming somewhere, you're coming in your bubble, but then thinking of, well, but what are the people doing that we're coming and being around? Or how about the people that are cooking for us and, things like that. And so, we're, and also I think something that we do really well is how we feed people. And, I think, we use a lot of good, fresh ingredients, but also, and this isn't COVID related stuff, but, my wife kind of oversees our kitchen, but, every type of produce that we use, we wash every produce we get, whether it's fruit, vegetables, even if it's prepackaged from Costco, we wash everything, in drinking water, but that also has, some of the iodine drops in it, everything that we do here, we have things like that we've always been doing, but we know that you guys come and you're only here for a certain amount of days, and we want you to be as healthy and fed well and showered up and getting a good night's sleep as possible, because that lets you go out and kind of lay it all out on the field each day, and yeah, so that I think we're doing well. We were doing well already, and so we've been able to adapt with the COVID stuff to kind of keep doing that well.
Super. I take extra M&Ms because it helps my fight against COVID. So hopefully you can bring in some extra M&Ms with cashews or almonds. I'm sorry. Anyway, just so you all know, I've recorded. I started recording about 10 minutes into it, and this has been really good. So you can share this with people if you need to. I'm going to have Scott probably come back when we have a little bit bigger group, because I think the door's been opened to say we can do this. I really feel pretty comfortable. Beth, you feel pretty comfortable with all this?
Yes, I was ready before you. Sorry.
Well, yeah, it is way more bold than that. Dan, are you pretty comfortable with all this? Anything that's holding you back?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm pretty comfortable. Like I said, I would just hate, my youngest, I would hate to see if he caught something. So, I mean, for me personally, I'm fine. I've traveled, to the other coast a variety of times, and, but, I still want to be, cautious there. I mean, I did have a COVID scare over the holidays. We got everybody tested and everybody was fine, but still, kind of put a little bit of, worry in me. But I think for the most part, I'm okay.
Dan would be of our group, Scott, of our two groups, Dan would be the leader of one of the groups. We'll probably have groups of 12. And then another guy not on the Colchado would be the other.
Yeah.
You've answered our questions very well. It's it nudges it all in the right direction, that's for sure. I have a feeling we'd have enough for 2 homes. The question would be if we have another class come through with a whole bunch of them, we may have you check the schedule maybe for another group or 2 groups. I'd imagine we might have room this year, a little later on when we get closer to it. Right now, 2 groups or 2 homes feels pretty good to me. Do you guys have any different feelings about that? Like, you think we want to attempt 3 homes, or are we better off just tackling
I think
2?
sticking with 2 is better. I think it also sets up a tone of some anticipation, something to look forward to into next year as well, to do it again. I don't feel like this is a one and done for our kids, curriculum side. I think this is the kind of trip that our kids we want to take them on, because we won't let them on an international trip, to like Nigeria or Lebanon. So I think this is something that we should perpetuate, and do it that way rather than try to glom into like 2 or more than 2, houses this trip. And besides, I think like we've already kind of alluded to, sure, we may have, 50 kids or, 25 families, but that doesn't mean we're probably looking at maybe half are ready to go today anyway. It may look different at the end of April.
Right. Scott, do you guys have a season, like when you stop building? You stop building like August 31st, or how do you guys work?
No, really the only time we close for 2 weeks each year around Christmas. But other than that, we're essentially open, to receive teams the rest of the year.
Okay.
We kind of talked about an alternative, like coming down over like a Thanksgiving break. So it sounds like that's a possibility, because you guys don't do Thanksgiving, right?
Absolutely. And just to say, we have many times over the years in the past had groups come down, or even my family, my sisters and brother-in-laws and my nieces and nephews and my folks for 12 years straight came down every year at Thanksgiving. And we would always build a house as a family, and which was really fun about that, because Thursday was the day we'd finish the house, give them the keys, and then anytime we have groups here at Thanksgiving, then we do like a traditional Thanksgiving dinner in our, for dinner that night. And yeah, it's, we've often done that, and it's real. I mean, it's a great way to spend Thanksgiving, together. So yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we may snag one of those Thanksgiving homes. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
We may have a lot of kids after the April classes. Whether or not everybody wants to go anywhere, obviously, is a question. So, Beth, I think what we should do is put out our email tomorrow and say you have to go, along with the flyer. You kind of pin down what we think we have. Did we have a count last week? Kind of a rough count?
What do you mean of what we anticipated?
Yeah.
For this
Well, last
class?
week we were kind
Yes,
of
17. The anticipation was approximately 17 would go through this April class.
Oh, that's through the new class. What about who's already signed up?
14.
14 are signed up. I mean, that's a sign-up sheet that's kind of old.
Oh, no, I've connected with everybody.
Okay, the 14, are they all like, feel like they all want to go?
Well, yeah, 2 of them are on the call and they represent 4 kids altogether.
Okay,
Hold on, let me check my
Okay.
sheet. So, D and 2 of his kids,
okay,
Veronica T's sister and her daughter, Gary Lemus and his 2 girls.
okay.
You know, so honestly, you know, they're all people that are okay traveling and they would fully embrace, you know, what Scott's talked about. So
Right.
I think that number that I gave you is fairly solid. The other thing is, you know, what if we are opening it up to the entire GU? We
Well,
could
we
do
cut-
a few to add
well-
more people, right?
Yeah, we can do that because Chano, I don't think will have a kid, and we really didn't restrict it. So you had to have a kid on the trip. I think, you know.
Oh, you did? I don't
No,
remember.
we did
that.
not. We did not.
Okay, right.
We always kind of said this would be a good way to do it.
Yeah, I just thought this was the trip though for the kids to go, not the other way that you had to bring a kid. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But anyway, I think our goal, Scott, is to, I've told people, my goal is to go somewhere, and if we accomplish about half, we normally would, but we have fun and we get out of our COVID bubble, and we like, you know, expand our world again, then it's a success. I'm not so much worried about the product or whatever we're doing. So that's kind of where we're at. So we'll probably, Scott, round you up. And I'm hoping I'll have a higher batting average with you, but I will. So we'll probably round you up in 3 or 4 weeks, because what we'll do is we'll try to figure out who really wants to go, and we'll say, you know, give us the truth, yeses, and then I'll try to have a group get on, and I'll have you kind of go through some of this again. We'll have it. It's being, you know, I recorded this session. But I think it gives people a little more comfort when they just kind of see a whole bunch of people and we're talking, and you know, people are okay. Then there's a little more synergy from the group to go. Yeah, I was going to ask you, is your wife she good with all this as far as you know? Like
Yeah.
Chris has to check with Dave. You said Angela's pretty good with it.
Yep.
She was going to go, right?
He's going.
Okay. And Scott, I may try to make a trip down there to check out a couple places. But I'll work that out later. Maybe I'll go 1 month or so. So is there any other questions? Chris, are you good? Scott, at night, my one question is, our events might be a little different than a normal church group, which I know you guys are fine with. Have the groups, you're trying to keep them all there, right? Pretty much, not let them go out to town or anything like that in the evening?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
That depends on the group. And to say, you know, we have some groups that like want to go to the beach and do a bonfire together, you know, and I mean, essentially, you know, they wouldn't be coming into contact with anyone necessarily to do that, you know, and
Okay.
again, it really all depends on the comfort level of the group, you know, and the people who they're with. So just the way that the question was framed, you know, to say, I think, you know, we try to take those on a case by case basis, but we're not in any way trying to put any extra fear in people when they come.
Right.
And,
Well, I'll be able to relax when we get back. And we're
yeah,
done.
and also I think, you know, because of some of what we have available here, you know, again, I mean, we have a couple ping pong tables, a couple of foosball tables. We have a sport court that's lit, you know, and it has a basketball hoop and, you know, and so there's things for people to do here. We have cornhole, you know, and so, you know, really when you've been out building all day and then you come back and then you have dinner and then depending on, you know, what kind, so now that week when you guys are here, there will be some other groups, but, you know, we'll want to know from you, yeah, what do you want your kind of evening activity to be, you know, and whether you're wanting to just you guys be coming in and being able to see a video, you know, from, because, you know, we shoot video every day. And so we're generally every evening, you know, when we kind of bring folks in our chapel time, you know, we show them a video, but we can curtail the week to fit well with, you know, with your plan. But to say, once people get showered up after dinner and stuff, then if they want to have fun, there's stuff here for them to do. So generally people aren't like, well, there's nothing to do here, let's go out somewhere. But we're not trying to keep people from going somewhere if they want to or need to.
Right. Well, Veronica doesn't like us to have too much fun, so we have to continue. All right. Is there anything else, Beth, Dan, or Veronica?
I like how Dan keeps asking, is there anything else? And then he asks more stuff.
Exactly.
Remembers. No, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for all the info.
Pointing out
It comes with an agenda or an outline, you know, but it just kind of comes to them as it goes along.
Yeah.
All right, Daniel, you're good?
I'm good.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll send out the big invite. Be more official. If you guys can double check on if you want to go or don't go, and if you don't want to go, that's fine. Because I want people to feel like, you know, everybody's going to be a little bit, this will be a little weird and it'll be a little bit of a stretch, but I think it'll be really good. And so I'm pretty excited about it. I didn't know, Scott, if you guys were going to do groups after what you'd been through. A couple of you came in late. Scott's wife had 8 people in her extended family die from COVID. So this, you know, Scott's not playing around with this stuff either. And that's pretty serious stuff. And Beth's had COVID and Dan's had COVID. And I've had friends at work that have been really sick. So it's a serious thing. Although the odds are pretty low. So anyway, that was really my main point tonight, Scott, was to see if YUGO would want to be doing this, and it sounds like you guys are. And hopefully you guys will get some groups. I think it's going to be hard. You get the board members dragging some people down because everybody, you know, we have churches not meeting still, and we have people that are really locked down still, and so it's all over the place. And so we're trying to be smart about it and you know, do it in a good way. Yeah. And we're excited if this works out good with our GU kids. We probably do we probably do this over and over. You know, 1 or 2 houses a year. So it'll be a lot of fun for our GU kids.
Well, it was nice spending time with you guys this evening, and yeah, look forward to the next time we have a call, and hopefully we'll be seeing some of you guys down here in June, Lord willing.
Yeah, great.
Yes, sir, Scott.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so
Thank you,
much.
Scott.
You did a
Thank
great
you.
job. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, Clarissa, for being on. I know last minute. Are you okay, Clarissa?
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.